Coming up today, it's looking likely Korea's National Assembly will have an unproductive August session as the rival parties remain locked in a dispute over a classified budget item. For the first time ever, Korean exports to China accounted for more than 10% of China's import market in the first half of the year. First, with China's military parade a matter of days away now, attention turns to which world leaders will be sat next to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 31st of August. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start at Korea's National Assembly, and with the main rival parties at odds, there are concerns the August extraordinary session could end later today without any significant progress. The final full Assembly session was originally scheduled for last Friday to pass the government's budget settlement for last year, vote on a Supreme Court Justice nominee and pass pending bills, but was called off as the two parties clashed over a classified budget item. And despite negotiations over the weekend, an agreement still could not be reached. Main opposition lawmakers are demanding full disclosure of a budget item known as, quote, special activities. They say it should be made public to ensure the funds are being spent wisely. However, the ruling Saenuri party has rejected the idea, claiming the roughly $700 million annual budget is used in relation to the nation's classified intelligence activities. The standoff could also represent a substantial setback for the National Assembly's 100-day regular session scheduled to begin on Tuesday. And Korea's ruling party is set to unilaterally introduce bills related to free trade agreements at a plenary meeting of the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee on this Monday. The 5 FTA-related bills which the party seeks to push ahead with include pending FTAs with China, New Zealand and Vietnam. Party lawmaker Nak Young-hwan, who is also the committee chairwoman, announced the party's decision last week, saying the FTAs are needed now more than ever. She added that if the rival parties cannot reach an agreement, the ruling party would be left with no choice but to manage the committee according to parliamentary law. For the first time ever, Korea's outbound shipments to China accounted for more than 10% of China's import market in the first half of this year. And this comes despite Korea's falling exports in general. Kwon So-ah has the details.
The proportion of Korean imports in China in the first half of the year has risen by 1 percentage point from the same period last year to 10.7%, reaching a double-digit figure for the first time ever. The proportion of Korean imports has been on a steady rise and is also widening its gap on Japanese imports in China since Korea supplanted Japan at the #1 spot in 2013. This is good news as Korea's exports haven't been doing well this entire year due to weak global demand, with outbound shipments to China no exception. In fact, exports to China fell more than 7% in the first half of this year, but considering China imported more than 19% less on year during the same period, the situation may not be as serious compared to other exporters to China.
Although China has shifted from an export and investment-focused growth strategy towards one focusing on the domestic market, it looks like Korean products still maintain high competitiveness.
An example of that competitiveness can be seen in Korea's top export to China, the memory semiconductor, which increased by almost 17% in the January to June period from last year. The consumption market is also on the rise, with Korean cosmetics, baby and hygiene products in demand. But some experts attribute Korea's market share of Chinese exports to the deteriorating relations between China and Japan in recent years, adding that the risks of continuous slowing demand will not abate in the short term. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Koreans' credit card spending overseas hit a record high during the first half of this year. According to the Bank of Korea on Monday, the amount of Koreans' overseas credit card spending during the first 6 months of this year reached a daily average of $24.2 million. This figure represents a jump of over 21% from the same period last year. Officials attributed the sharp rise to a tax law revision last year that increased personal tax allowances for Korean travelers making purchases overseas. In contrast, domestic credit card spending increased by just 5.4%. Samsung Group will officially launch their newly merged company, Samsung C&T, on Tuesday. The new entity is comprised of the former Samsung C&T and Cheil Industries, and it's targeting in excess of $50 billion in sales and a pre-tax profits of $3.4 billion by the year 2020. The company also seeks to expand and strengthen its presence in the bio-industry sector, as well as secure a place at the top of the global fashion and leisure sectors. Shareholders of both Samsung Group affiliates approved the high-stakes merger last month to facilitate the leadership succession from the group's ailing chairman Lee Gun-hee to his son Lee Jae-yong. After the official launch on September 1st, the company plans to hold a board meeting on Wednesday to elect its new chairperson. Now, there have been signs of improvement in the domestic economy based on some figures, raising hopes the country has finally recovered from the fallout of the MERS outbreak. However, as our Shin Se-min reports, it's not all good news.
Korea's industrial output continued its expansionary period for 2 straight months in July, with the country's service sectors rebounding as the domestic economy recovers from the fallout of the MERS outbreak. Statistics Korea said Monday that the service sector picked up to expand 1.7% in July from the previous month. This is mainly due to greater domestic sales that grew nearly 2% on month, as well as a 7% increase in sales at local eateries and lodging establishments. However, in the mining, manufacturing, and electricity industries, production dropped by 0.5%, just a month after the production figures rebounded in June after 3 straight months of negative growth from March. In a report by the Bank of Korea, manufacturers had a pessimistic business outlook for August due to slowing exports affecting manufacturing businesses. The central bank said that its business survey index for August fell to 68, down 2 points from July. A reading below 100 indicates that pessimists outnumber optimists. The central bank said that although the businesses were recovering from the economic fallout of the MERS outbreak, external economic conditions from China's slowing growth and the decreased working days from the summer holidays have lowered the sentiment level. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The number 2 at the U.S. Federal Reserve has left the door open for a rate hike in September. Speaking at an annual economic conference in Wyoming over the weekend, Fed Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer said that factors that have kept inflation below the central bank's target level of 2% have lightly begun to fade. The Federal Reserve's key policy meeting is set for September 16th and 17th. Investors, governments and central banks around the world are bracing for the Fed to start raising rates in the near future. Rates have remained near zero since the 2008 global financial crisis. With China's Victory Day military parade fast approaching, attention is focusing on who will be sat next to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Such seating plans are often a good barometer of the country's diplomatic relations. Hwang Sang-hee tells us more.
The most likely scenario is that Chinese President Xi Jinping will be sitting between his South Korean and Russian counterparts at the September 3rd military parade in Beijing. China and Russia are jointly celebrating the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and Beijing's high-profile event follows a similar ceremony held in Moscow in May. If the seat to the right of the Chinese leader is reserved for Putin to showcase China-Russia ties, most speculate President Park Geun-hye will be seated to his left. This given South Korea's status among the 30 countries attending the upcoming celebrations, which includes Sudan and Venezuela, as well as blossoming Seoul-Beijing ties. Absent from the guest list are leaders from the United States and other major Western powers that fought alongside China in World War II. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is also staying away. North Korea will be represented by Choi Ryong-hae, secretary of the ruling Workers' Party and one of Kim's closest aides. The young North Korean leader's absence is another sign of cooling ties with China, which has grown much closer to South Korea under President Park and Xi's leadership. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The European Union has decided to hold an emergency meeting 2 weeks from now in a bid to step up action on the continent's escalating migration crisis. In a statement on Sunday, Luxembourg, which currently holds the EU's rotating presidency, said the EU's Interior and Home Affairs ministers will meet on September 14th in Brussels to tackle the situation. The Luxembourg government added that political actions are underway to assess the situation on the ground and to discuss the next steps. The call for the meeting comes after the ministers of Germany, France and Britain jointly requested an urgent meeting earlier in the day. At least 10 people have been killed and more than 200 injured in a fire on Sunday at a residential compound for foreign workers at Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil giant. 20 Korean nationals are reportedly among the injured, but their injuries are not said to be life-threatening. The Arab nation's Civil Defense Agency says with many of the injured in critical condition, more deaths are expected, however. The fire has been put out and investigations are now underway to find out what caused the blaze. Saudi Aramco is the world's largest oil company in terms of crude production and exports, and it operates several gated compounds for more than 61,000 foreign workers from 77 countries in the eastern region of the kingdom. An Italian energy company says it has discovered a supergiant gas field in the Mediterranean Sea covering around 100 square kilometers. The gas field could hold the energy equivalent of around 5.5 billion barrels of oil. Now, Eni, the company which unearthed it, says it won't know the field's true size until it begins to develop it. Located in the deep waters off the northern coast of Egypt, Eni claims the gas field could be the largest in the world. The company estimates that once developed, the field could satisfy Egypt's natural gas demand for decades. Google will stop flash ads and videos from playing on its Chrome web browser from Tuesday. The company says a new version of Chrome will be rolled out and it will automatically block any non-essential content using the Flash software. Flash was developed by Adobe and is widely used to display content on internet browsers, but it is known to hurt battery life, computing performance, and is riddled with holes in its security. Advertisers have been warned that if they do not switch their content to the more secure and efficient alternative, HTML5, their content will not be seen unless specifically clicked on. Google Chrome is the world's most widely used web browser with over 40% market share. For many years now, Korea's state-run agricultural agency has been sharing domestic farming techniques with developing countries around the world to help them become more self-sufficient. The latest example can be seen on the island nation of Sri Lanka. Our Won Ji-yeon reports.
These farmers work all day under the sun to cultivate onions, a major cash crop for Sri Lanka. Although the summer is normally considered a good season for growing onions, the country's intense heat can make harvesting very difficult. In fact, Sri Lankan farms produce an average of 15.5 tons of onions per hectare, only a fourth of Korea's production. Sri Lanka also lags in terms of quality and variety of onions produced due to the susceptibility to insect infestation on its farms. Korea's Rural Development Administration has decided to intervene with a project called COPIA, or the Korea Project on International Agriculture. COPIA has set up test farms in 3 different regions in Sri Lanka, each varying in climate. At these farms, Korean officials demonstrate some of Korea's effective farming techniques for Sri Lankan farmers.
Our strategy aims to help these farmers become more self-sufficient as soon as possible.
The program's initial goal is to increase the amount of onion production in the region. By helping farmers figure out which type of onions are best suited for the various regional conditions, COPIA hopes to raise the self-sufficiency rate of Sri Lankan farms to as high as 70%. Won Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day, and thank you as always for watching. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.